Hey, what's going on, y'all? It's me, Psychic Charm, and today I'm going to be talking about Giannis and the possibility of him being traded. This has been rumored for a while, even going far back as 2020, even far back beyond that. The Bucks have just hit a wall recently. They've just not been good without Giannis, and even when they have him, they've not been good. Giannis has came out and not necessarily demanded a trade, but heavily implied it and basically demanded a trade. He just doesn't want to be a bad guy in this situation, which, everybody's different. That's understandable. With that being said, a lot of teams are interested. Now, how many teams might get Giannis is another question. When I watched Giannis play before he got hurt, I think it was against the Denver Nuggets, I believe it was. It didn't seem like he was fully engaged at all. I think it's pretty obvious the writing is on the wall, and Shams has came out and said things about Giannis. I divvied up some teams in order about which ones are realistic, unrealistic, unless Giannis just is like, I want to go there, which I don't know if Giannis is really that kind of guy. He already doesn't want to be the bad guy. So I don't know if Giannis is going to be like, all right, I want to go to here. I want to go to the Lakers and only the Lakers. So I got teams that are realistic, teams that are unrealistic unless Giannis demands, and teams that have good chemistry but could do it. They have the assets. I just don't know if they would do it. Shams came out and said Giannis is looking for a new home, whatever that's supposed to mean. I guess Giannis is finally leaving the animal shelter that is the Milwaukee Bucks and is being shopped around for a new home. So let's go ahead and jump into these teams. So firstly, I will start out with unrealistic unless Giannis demands he wants to go there. Firstly, I'm going to speak the most unrealistic one, and maybe it is possible for how they got Luka Doncic, so maybe they do it. The Lakers. They just don't have enough picks. And their package is really underwhelming because it would have to include Reeves, I imagine. I don't think LeBron would want to go to Milwaukee. I don't think you're trading Luka at that point. Maybe you do, I guess, but that would be weird. Then you have Roy Hachimura, who's okay. Maybe you could flip him for a pick. Like Reeves, you could possibly build around. Roy is a rotation player that might not match the timeline, but you would want to trade for assets. They just have some rotation guys that are expiring. Like maybe you want a bunch of expiring deals like Gabe Vincent, Maxi Kleber, all that kind of stuff. I just don't see that happening. And Reeves is already an old enough player. I think he's 27. And if you're going to rebuild, by the time you've really rebuilt, he's going to be old enough to where it's going to be a problem. I don't see the Lakers being a realistic trade option. The next one we got here is the Golden State Warriors. They are interesting. There's just a couple roadblocks here. So firstly, Jimmy's hurt, which could possibly make it weird because I think Jimmy needs to approve of a trade while being injured in order to be traded. Now, maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't, who knows? But that is a roadblock, and he does eat up a lot of salary. And I don't know if Giannis would particularly want to play with Jimmy Butler after all their clashes in the playoffs and stuff. It's debatable. I don't know if those guys really like each other. You would probably trade Jimmy. But the other thing is their young talent is kind of underwhelming. Like Kuminga, nobody really wants Kuminga. He's looking for a new home too. Then you have Moses Moody and Brandon Podziemski and Quentin Post. I mean, these are okay young players. This isn't really the haul you want for Giannis, ideally, in terms of young talent. There's not really any guys to build around here. These guys could be okay, but I think there's teams that have better packages. The positive thing about the Warriors, though, is that they do have most of their picks in order besides some weird 2030 restriction they have with like the Wizards. They mostly have their picks in order, and a 2030 to 2032 pick from the Warriors could be good for the Bucks in the future. Could be really valuable because I imagine at that point Steph is probably retired. Giannis probably past his prime, especially in 2032. I imagine that would be something that's a good haul there. The other thing is the young players are just underwhelming. That's kind of why I doubt that they would do this trade unless Giannis just wants to go there, and the Bucks honor that. The Warriors are 16% favorite, which is the second highest on call sheet. Maybe that is indicative of something, though it could be indicative of a bunch of dumbasses throwing their money around. The next team that I put, and this will make some people angry, it's the Knicks. I just kind of see that they would have to gut out a lot, and either trade they do would just be you're either gutting out depth to a severe degree, or I don't know if the Bucks would want that. So they don't have any available first round picks. I think they could apply some swaps with the Bucks. Other than that, though, they've traded them all out, and you can't trade consecutive picks because of the Stepien rule. Basically no first round picks. Maybe you could give out some future swaps, but that's not as promising as a future unprotected first. Two packages that you could do is either A, you trade Karl Anthony Towns, or B, you include OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, which you could do that. The problem is if you trade Cat, then the Bucks are in a weird situation where they have like Miles Turner and Cat. That's a very weird situation. You would ideally want to flip those guys, and I'm sure you could because they're both stretch fives and really talented players, especially Karl Anthony Towns. They would get Karl Anthony Towns with wanting to flip him. He's not the guy you want to build around. Outside of picks as well, they don't really have any promising young talent. You're risking getting Karl Anthony Towns, or if you do a trade and gut out the depth of the Knicks roster and you trade Mikal Bridges, you trade OG Anunoby, you trade Josh Hart, you're gutting out a lot of depth there. And even then, these aren't really young players that the Bucks can build around. They could flip these teams to contenders, and I'm sure contenders would want those, but you really are gambling a lot there because when you're going past the initial transaction, your return might be more underwhelming. Maybe you do get something, but you're really gambling there past that first transaction that you have with this Giannis trade. They do have the highest betting odds of getting Giannis. I think they're 23% on Call Sheet. I've seen this as well, putting Drew Holiday in the trade. Giannis wants to play with Drew, apparently. That would be a good fit for New York. For one, he does make a shit ton of money. Two, the Portland Trailblazers is not really a guy that you want long-term, Drew Holiday. He's more there, I guess, to be a mentor. And you could trade maybe an OG Anunoby, a Mikal Bridges, or you could trade a Josh Hart. And I think that could be just fine. Thing is, though, is if you're getting the Blazers involved to reroute those Bucks picks to the Bucks, then the Blazers, you're going to have to really talk them into something to give up those picks, because those are going to be really good picks in the future. They're basically treasure. You're not going to really give them up. And at that point, if you're trying to convince the Blazers to give up so much, they're going to be like, well, why can't we get Giannis? And Giannis is going to be like, well, I've already played with Damian Lillard, and I don't really want to play in Portland. And there's just some teams that I don't really see Giannis going to because of the market, like a Charlotte Hornets, Brooklyn Nets, Portland Trailblazers. There's just some that don't make sense. A Sacramento Kings, something like that. There's just some teams that I'm not even going to address. But if I'm wrong and he goes to the Hornets or Giannis goes to the Nets, I will eat that L. I'll take the L. With the Knicks, I know they're the favorite, but the problem I have is that if you're the Bucks, you're really gambling a lot by acquiring guys that you would in turn want to flip. That is a variable there. Teams might not want them. You might not get the return you want. Like, you get OG Anunoby, he might go for 1 first at one point, or Mikal Bridges, or a Josh Hart. Hell, Josh Hart might not even go for a first. He might go for a second, or might just go for a 1-for-1. You can rebuild like this, but it requires a lot more steps, and is a lot more steps removed from that initial transaction, as I mentioned. So that is something that is worrying if you are the Bucks, if you do this trade, and you're not really getting young talent. Like, you could get Tyler Kolek, but that's really about it. You already have Ryan Rollins. So at that point, weird fit-wise there. Yeah, the Knicks, I don't know. Unless Giannis says, I want to be a New York Knick, and I really want to go there, I don't really see them being the team that gets Giannis. I feel like their package is just really underwhelming and probably not what the Bucks want. I mean, if you don't have young players and picks, what are you really offering at that point? You know, unless you're offering a superstar that can match Giannis. And let's be real here, if you're going to do Karl Anthony Towns, like, there's a reason if you're the Knicks, you're trading Karl Anthony Towns for Giannis. And if you trade Cat to another team, you might get a first. Who knows? Maybe you're not even able to trade Cat. You know, maybe no teams are interested at that point, and he just walks in free agency. Like, there's just so many variables at that point you have to kind of worry about if you're going to flip guys at that point. Outside of that, those are the teams I consider unrealistic, unless Giannis just says, I want to go there. I have another category here. These teams could do it, and I don't know if they do because they have good chemistry right now. They have a good thing going, and this could really fuck them up. It's a real gamble if you do trade for Giannis, if you're one of these teams. So first they have the OKC Thunder. I'm not going to spend too long on the Thunder because we know that the Thunder have a lot of first-round picks, and they have the young talent. They have all of the criteria. They probably have the best trade package for Giannis if they were to really go all in. The problem is, though, for OKC is that they just won the title. If you're Sam Presti, it's like, yeah, I could get Giannis, but this is a really good young core. It works really well as a team, and I could fuck this whole thing up, maybe potential dynasty, if I trade J-Dub or Chet Holmgren or even both of them, and all these picks. I mean, you trade out some of those young guys and young guys that could be stars on their own teams. You could fuck up that whole experiment in OKC. Unless OKC really flames out in the postseason, I don't see them doing this at the trade deadline, which is mostly what I'm looking at here, because if you get to the offseason and Giannis has one more year on his deal, things get a lot more interesting. You're OKC, you're probably not trading for Giannis unless you just have a meltdown, unless you get swept in the first or second round, or gentlemen swept. But I don't see anybody doing OKC like that, unless the Spurs just truly have their number or something. But I don't see that happening in the postseason. Next, we do have the Spurs, which I will get to as well. A trade does make sense here. Like, they don't really have a solid four. It's like Harrison Barnes. They don't play Jeremy Sohan a lot. Julian Champagnie's a little bit undersized when they play him there. Sometimes they put Wemby at the four or Luke Cornett. That is something that is questionable, that kind of fit there. And they have a surplus of guards as well. A Wemby and Giannis defense and offense would work quite well, since Wemby can shoot the three. Giannis has won a Defensive Player of the Year, and Wemby probably should have last year if he played enough games, and probably should this year if he ends up playing enough games. So you have that. You would have an all-time defense already. The only problem is that you're doing good as the Spurs. Like, you would fuck this thing up if you do that, because you give up, like, let's say Fox, Castle, or Harper, or any of the two of them, or one, and picks, and some of these other young players that you do have, like maybe a Julian Champagnie. Maybe if you're the Spurs, I mean, you've just beat OKC 3 times this year, and you've really had their number. You know, you have Wemby, you have this great guard core that looks like they jive really well together. You have a great surplus of young talent, and you have these picks. Like, you could do it. But let's say you trade Dylan Harper and Castle, and you have Fox, you have Wemby, you have Giannis. That'd be a good team, right? It really narrows your window with Giannis, or with Wemby, because Giannis is in his 30s, De'Aaron Fox late 20s. It would really narrow that window and maybe put Wemby potentially in Giannis' situation once he enters his 30s. The Spurs, you could do it, and I'm sure that they're asking. They probably don't want to give up too much of these young players. They probably would give up Fox, but again, if you're the Bucks, would you really want De'Aaron Fox if you're going to be rebuilding? You would want a Castle, you would want a Dylan Harper, but I don't know if you would want a Fox, who makes a lot of money and could make this trade work, and you could facilitate that through him. I just don't know if the Spurs really are willing to fuck this up. The third team I have, I was debating putting Houston in the tier that the teams that are realistic to get Giannis, but I do think that they wouldn't want to fuck this up, because I do think they have a good thing going, and I don't think they would really risk it to do this. Now, there's a couple avenues that they could do a Giannis trade. One is trading Fred VanVleet. Fred is hurt. That would have to go through Fred. Maybe he would accept, maybe he wouldn't, who knows. And I'm sure in this trade that they would want a Şengün or a Amin Thompson. But the problem is Şengün and Amin Thompson are really good players. These guys are just kind of scratching the surface of where they're going to be. Would you want to do that if you're Houston? And then let's say you do trade for Giannis. Like, the fit just feels really awkward there, because Houston is already an awkward team. Like, I think it's a lot more realistic if the Rockets trade for a point guard. I think that's what they really need. And Giannis can kind of do that. The problem is they're not a great three-point shooting team either. And if you look at this Bucks roster and rosters that have been built around Giannis in the past, they try to optimize shooting around Giannis. I mean, if you keep KD, of course, which I imagine you would in this situation. I mean, KD can shoot. If you keep Jabari can. Amin, if you keep him, can't. Şengün is sort of a fake shooter. Like, I don't really believe him in the playoffs. And then if you do this double big thing, or whatever you do, whoever you include, the Rockets, I think, are lowest in three-point volume in the league. And if you're building a team around Giannis, then you want that shooting. They do have a package they could offer. They could offer Şengün, they could offer Amin Thompson. These are players that look like they're going to be really good in the future, and the Rockets do have plenty of picks. They're not an OKC, but they have a good amount of picks, and they could really get something going here. They do have the young players. You can include Reed Shepherd as well. It's just, I don't know if they want to screw up a good thing going that they have here, and that would really advance their timeline if they trade for Giannis, which I don't know if they really want to go all in. At that point, maybe they could, but if you have Şengün and Amin as a duo, and you have these guys for a while, I think the next 10 years, if you keep those guys, you'll have a contending roster, or a base where you can build a contending roster. So I don't know if they'd really want to fuck that up, but who knows? They're interesting, and they're the one I feel least confident putting them in the chemistry kind of thing, because their record isn't all too impressive in the West, because they're the 4th seed right now, but it's only a couple games apart because it's the West. So, and the Spurs too are the 2 seed. That's another reason why I mentioned, like, why would they want to fuck this thing up? So next, I'll go into teams that I feel are realistic. I only put 3 teams in here, and if I'm forgetting one, yell at me in the comments section. But I really do feel like, through a lot of thought, I think these are the 3 most realistic teams here, because I think they offer the Bucks what they want and could give a Giannis a contending roster after he gets there. So firstly, I have Atlanta. They're probably the best with picks right now because they have that New Orleans pick. That could be the best pick in the draft. I mean, that could be really the first overall pick with how the Hornets or the Pelicans have been playing. That could be good for the Bucks because you could get that pick, you could rebuild. The only thing is, though, if you are Atlanta, do you want to just trade Jalen Johnson after the season that he's had? Because it is an awkward fit. If you put Giannis next to Jalen Johnson, it feels like an awkward fit. Maybe these guys could adjust their play style, probably more so Jalen Johnson would have to. That's also one reason that Jalen Johnson and Trae Young, they had a bad record together when they played, because they both really demanded the ball, and both these guys have a really similar play style, that kind of archetype of a forward. They could do it. They have the picks, they have the young players. You could include a Risha, you could include a Jalen Johnson if you're willing to do that. You can include a Dyson Daniels, and you have the picks. Like, you really could do it. The pros really are the players that you could offer the Milwaukee Bucks and the picks, and you will maintain depth because the Hawks are a deep team. And if you keep Porzingis, which maybe you do, maybe you don't, but if you do keep him, which you probably should, then that would be a really good defense. And Giannis always plays better when he has a center that can shoot threes. That's why they got Miles Turner. That's why Brook Lopez had to learn how to shoot threes. That is Giannis's optimal play style. That is the pros. Now the cons is, I already mentioned it, but it is an awkward fit. And the other thing too is the market. Would Giannis want to play in Atlanta? In terms of the NBA, that's not necessarily a big market. Would Giannis want to play there? I don't know. He's joked before and mentioned how he wants international players to play in big markets. So it's a real big question mark if he would want to do that. That's my thought on Atlanta. They do have a shot, but there is some question marks I have. But they do have a good shot with picks. It just really depends if Giannis would want to go there too. Maybe he says, I don't know about Atlanta. Next are the Toronto Raptors. You may be surprised to see them here. Personally, I think that they have a good package to offer the Milwaukee Bucks because they have young players and picks. They have like a Colin Murray Boyles. They have like a Grady Dick, you have players like that. Maybe you give up Scotty Barnes. I don't know if the Raptors would, but I'll get to that. But you do have young players, you do have picks, and you do have the salaries to match, and that would be good for the Milwaukee Bucks. They would be looking for that. The pros is if you send Giannis there, is that they're already a well-rounded roster, depending on who you keep. You would still have depth and young players because you're not gutting out all 10 guys from this roster, and they really are a deep roster. I think actually it is a good market because it is Canada. Right, that's the only team in Canada is the Toronto Raptors. Talent-wise, it seems like a pretty good fit, but there are some pros and cons with the fit because in some capacity it is. You could retool. You could retool if you're the Raptors with Giannis. Just make some trades. There is some awkwardness with, let's say, a Brandon Ingram. Let's say like a Scotty Barnes if you keep him. Let's say a Jakob Poeltl, which I'm sure the Bucks probably don't want, but you would probably keep him. RJ Barrett is a little bit questionable of a shooter. There's some questionable shooting and an overlap too. Another con is that Scotty Barnes, much like Jalen Johnson, is a similar archetype of a forward that Giannis is. Scotty Barnes really isn't a shooter. He struggles shooting the 3-ball. He's a great defender, like probably first team, all defensive team. And if you trade for Giannis, then you could maybe start Sandro Mamukelashvili at the 5. If you do trade Scotty, then you have Brandon Ingram, who's been throughout his career and 3-point shooter. I've not checked his stats in Toronto. I know RJ kind of struggles from the 3-point line. I'm not sure what Emmanuel Quickley is shooting, but historically I think he's been a pretty good shooter. That is kind of questionable with the Toronto Raptors if you do trade for him. The Bucks kind of have a questionable return too if you don't get Scotty Barnes, because then at that point you have Brandon Ingram and RJ Barrett, which again, like the Knicks situation is like, do you want to flip this guy? And also I forgot to mention that for the Hawks too, same thing. If you trade Porzingis, like, do you really want to flip this guy? It's several steps removed from the initial trade, and you don't know what their value is going to be after you've acquired them. And usually teams don't flip them right away. They try to play up their value usually. That would be something that if you don't trade Barnes, or you don't trade like a star or potential star like that wouldn't be optimal for the Bucks. So the next team that I got, and I might be biased here because this is my team, and you can guess what it is, the Miami Heat, because they've been rumored. I do think that the odds of them getting Giannis is very intriguing. And I'm really not trying to be biased here, right? Because I know as a fan, like, I can be biased. I can be biased as a fan towards my own fan base. But to be self-aware and realize that. But I think the Heat have a really underrated offer that they could give the Bucks. There are some pros here. I'll mention the pros and I'll mention the cons, okay? Now, the pros is that, for one, you're decent pick-wise. It's not the best pick-wise. It's not as good as the Raptors or the Hawks. Those teams have better pick situations. You're decent pick-wise. You're a really great market as well, but you do have that going for you, and you do have young talent. You do have like a Khalil Ware. You do have a Tyler Hero who's sort of young, maybe. If you do trade him, who knows what the Bucks want there. You do also have a Davion Mitchell. You do have a Jaime Jaquez, who is in 6th Man of the Year running, and you have Kasparas Yakashonis, who's looked good this season. You have a Pallel Larson. Like, these are players that are good, and you could offer. Maybe you offer Jovic as well. He's not been as good this season, to be honest. Not as good as those other guys. The Heat, they really critically lack the guy. They're a great defense, but if they were to get the guy like Giannis, they could probably be one of the best teams, if not the best team in the East. That might be me being biased, but you're decent pick-wise, and you do have young players that could be good. Now, Ware, I don't know what his ceiling is. Personally, like, I'm high on the guy, but Spoelstra doesn't really let him shine, and Spoelstra historically doesn't really like playing young players that much. You don't know what Ware's ceiling is, but you would get some young players there. Now, Ware, I would imagine you would probably trade Miles Turner after you do get Ware, which you could net something for Miles Turner. If you do that, you would have to trade him Miles Turner at that point, or run Ware at the 4 or Miles, but that would be really weird if you're the Bucks. But you would get young players back, and you would get picks back, which I think that would be really good for the Bucks for what they're looking for. And the Heat, when I looked, had a 14% chance. I saw it jump up to a 22% chance a second ago because I got call sheet up right here on my other monitor while I'm recording. It's jumped up to a 17% chance. I saw it as a 22%, but the Heat have lingered about 2 or 3 in terms of like favorability. I think it makes sense because you're not depleting the roster after you get Giannis. Let's say you trade Kasparas Yakashonis. Let's say you trade Hero. Let's say you trade Ware and whatever else, maybe Jovic, I don't know. But you trade some combination of those guys. Then you have a team of Bam Adebayo, Giannis, Andrew Wiggins, Davion Mitchell, and Norman Powell. And if you keep Jaquez, you'd have him off the bench. I think that would be a good team. Any team trading for Giannis has the risk of gutting some depth, which you would hopefully try to change through free agency or some other means, maybe the draft, but you're probably giving up most of your draft assets. You wouldn't be fucking yourself in that situation if you're Giannis, because you're going to a team that can offer something for you, but also you can compete with, and you have a good, be a good fit with. And the thing is too, you can also offer some role players to the Bucks if they just want to flip somebody, I guess. But you have Wiggins, Hero, and Powell. I don't know if the Bucks would want those. I don't think they would. That's what my gut feels. But again, that is something that you could do if you're the Bucks. I'd be doubtful of that for reasons I've mentioned prior in this video. Those are the pros that I have, and I've harped about those because I'm biased and I'm a Heat fan, okay? I'll go to the cons, and I can be self-aware of that. Firstly, is Pat Riley's really stubborn. If we remember in the Damian Lillard trade saga, he didn't even offer Tyler Hero reportedly, which is just insane. I thought Tyler Hero that entire time was on the table, and I just assumed that he was, just based on like the fit, everything. Like, I just assumed that we were going to have to give up Tyler Hero, but reportedly Pat Riley didn't. And And Pat Riley back in 2019, when he was trying to trade for Jimmy Butler while he was on the Wolves, not the Sixers, but, on the Wolves, Tom Thibodeau was asking for some more picks for Pat Riley for the Jimmy Butler deal, and then Pat Riley called him a motherfucker and hung up on the phone. Which, that's just Pat Riley. He has a reputation. Maybe that is the reason why the Heat can't get it done, is because Pat Riley is being stubborn. Pat Riley does have his harpoon out and he's whale hunting. I imagine that the Heat, this would be the offer that you do go all in on, and you do offer basically anybody except maybe Bam. And then the weird thing with Terry Rozier's contract, we don't know if he's tradable. I still don't think Adam Silver's fully answered that yet, because the Heat, I know this as a fan, we don't know if we can trade Terry Rozier because of the ongoing gambling investigation. So that's a huge salary that is on our books. It is expiring, but it's on our books, and that's not great. And you could use that salary if you don't trade for Giannis, which is also a pro, or, well, if you do trade for Giannis. The pro of it is that that money expires and you could get some free agents and role players to make that up. Again, that could be another great thing that you could do if you're the Heat in this situation. But including him in a trade, apparently the thing that I read was that the Heat don't know if we can include Terry Rozier in a trade until the trade is complete. Then the league has to approve it, which is just really weird and basically makes him like a lot less untradeable than he already is. That is something that's weird and could stall it because of that contract and its value. I do think the Heat have one of the best offers and could offer Giannis contention while also offering the Bucks something. Putting Giannis in a good market, also offering the Bucks plenty of assets and picks and young players. If I had to name a favorite, I really don't know, because I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, Giannis could really put pressure to go to the Knicks or the Warriors. Those are the two betting favorites right now that have been on top. Maybe, Giannis makes a couple places that he wants to go. Maybe somewhere surprising does it. Maybe one of those teams that could, like I mentioned, the Spurs or Houston do it. But realistically, this is what I see. I really see three teams doing it just based on Giannis and his personality of being like not wanting to rock the boat. You have Atlanta, which I've mentioned them, Raptors, and Heat. And yeah, hopefully my reasons make sense. If I had to give a favorite, I really don't know. I don't want to say it's us because I'll sound incredibly biased. But I really do think the Heat have a good trade package and would be a good team for Giannis to go to, and the Bucks get something in exchange. The only thing that's really holding up the trade is a 2027 pick, which the Hornets traded Terry Rozier while he was under gambling investigation, so we should get that pick back so we have all our picks unlocked. But you could trade 2026, you could trade a 2029 or 2031 or a 2030 and a 2032, I think. But you do have most of your picks, which is good. You just don't have all of them in a row, which sucks. So I think at most you could offer 3 first-round picks, which is pretty good, and young players. So anyways, thank you all for watching. We will see where Giannis goes. And if he doesn't go anywhere by the trade deadline, then this video is going to look a lot different. This video is really just made in mind for the trade deadline. Now, if Giannis does decide to wait it out and the Bucks decide to, that changes the situation completely. And I'll just make a video in the summer at that point and pass the trade deadline whenever. That's my thoughts right now. So thanks everybody for watching. This has been Psychic Charm, and peace out.